Send $10,000 for your niece's sweet 16. My sister demanded, along with pics of a limousine, designer dress, and a private DJ. I said no. 10 minutes later, Mom messaged, "Pay up or you're dead to us." I, 34M, stared at my phone screen, trying to process the sheer audacity of the message that had just come through. My sister had sent a massive block of text, demanding $10,000 to fund her daughter's sweet 16, she demanded. Accompanying the text were dozens of high-resolution photos of a custom stretch limousine, a heavily beaded designer dress that looked like it belonged on a red carpet, and a promotional flyer for a local high-end private DJ. I scrolled through the images, a cold knot forming in my stomach. I have always been the family safety net. The one who worked 60-hour weeks to build a stable life while my sister floated from one disastrous financial decision to the next. I had paid her rent when she was facing eviction. I had covered my mother's medical bills when she gambled away her savings. I had always been there, quietly absorbing their chaotic life choices with my own bank account. But $10,000 for a teenager's birthday party was not an emergency. It was an extortion attempt wrapped in tulle and glitter. I sent a brief, unambiguous reply stating that I would not be sending the money. I explained that while I loved my niece, a $10,000 party was an absurd expectation and entirely outside the realm of reality. I set the phone down, expecting a tantrum. I did not expect what actually happened. Exactly 10 minutes later, a message arrived from my mother. It was brief, venomous, and entirely devoid of the maternal warmth she usually faked when she needed something. She stated that if I did not pay for the party, I was completely dead to them. She added that family provides for family, and my refusal to fund my niece's milestone proved I was a selfish, arrogant failure who had forgotten where he came from. I sat in the quiet of my living room and let those words wash over me. For years, I had kept the peace at the expense of my own sanity. I had allowed them to treat me as an endless ATM, because I believed that enduring their toxicity was the price of admission for having a family. But seeing that ultimatum in stark digital text broke something fundamentally essential inside me. The guilt I usually felt was entirely gone, replaced by a cold, sharp sense of clarity. If I was dead to them, I reasoned, then a ghost could not be expected to pay their bills. I opened my laptop and began a process of malicious, permanent compliance. I logged into my cellular provider's portal and navigated to the family plan. I had been paying the phone bills for my mother, my sister, and my niece for the last 6 years. With 3 clicks, I suspended their lines and scheduled their numbers for permanent cancellation at midnight. Next, I moved to my auto insurance. My mother's vehicle was on my policy because her credit was too ruined to secure her own coverage. I submitted the forms to remove her vehicle effective immediately, knowing the state would notify her of the lapse in coverage within days. I then logged into the joint emergency bank account I had set up for my mother years ago. I had regularly deposited funds there to ensure she never went hungry or missed a utility payment. I transferred the entire balance back into my primary private account and initiated the paperwork to close the joint account completely. Finally, I went through every streaming service, grocery delivery app, and premium subscription I owned and aggressively purged their profiles, changing all the passwords. The entire process took less than an hour. When I closed my laptop, I felt a physical weight lift from my shoulders. I was dead to them. I intended to stay dead. Update 1. It took exactly 14 hours for the reality of their situation to set in. Because I had severed their cellular service, they could not call or text me directly. Instead, I began receiving a deluge of emails. My sister's emails started out furious, demanding to know why her phone showed no service and accusing me of being petty. The tone shifted to panic as she realized her streaming accounts were locked, and her grocery app kept rejecting her orders because my credit card had been removed. My mother chose a different route. She bypassed digital communication entirely and sent my aunt to my house to act as a physical emissary. I answered the door to find my aunt standing on my porch, looking deeply uncomfortable. She launched into a prepared speech, expressing her disappointment in my behavior and urging me to apologize to my mother and sister. She insisted that family fights happen, but cutting off essential services was cruel and unusual. I did not argue. I calmly invited my aunt inside, asked her to sit at the dining table, and handed her a thick manila folder I had printed out that morning. Inside the folder was a meticulously highlighted spreadsheet, spanning the last 5 years. It detailed every single financial transaction I had made on behalf of my mother and sister. It showed the rent payments, the car repairs, the utility bailouts, the loans that were never repaid, and the thousands of dollars in incidental expenses I had silently absorbed. At the bottom of the spreadsheet was the grand total, a number so staggeringly high, It made my aunt physically gasp when she read it. I then handed her a printed screenshot of my sister's demand for the $10,000 party, followed immediately by my mother's ultimatum declaring me dead to the family. I looked my aunt in the eye and explained that I was simply honoring my mother's wishes. I stated that I had bought my place in this family 100 times over, and the price had finally become too high. I told her that if she felt so strongly about family supporting family, she was more than welcome to take over the cell phone bills and fund the limousine herself. My aunt sat in stunned silence, flipping through the pages of bank statements. The righteous indignation she had brought to my doorstep completely evaporated. She apologized quietly, left the folder on the table, and walked out. Within a few days, the narrative within the extended family drastically shifted. My aunt had clearly spoken to the rest of the relatives, because the flying monkeys stopped coming. The harassing emails from my sister and mother slowed down, replaced by a sullen, bitter silence. They had tried to paint me as the villain, but the cold, hard numbers had exposed their grift to the entire family. Update 2. 3 weeks passed, and the silence was golden. I was sleeping better, my stress levels had plummeted, and my savings account was growing at a rate I hadn't seen in years. But the nagging question of the $10,000 still bothered me. My sister was entitled, but demanding that specific massive amount entirely upfront seemed unusually desperate, even for her. The answer arrived unexpectedly, through a phone call from my former brother-in-law, my niece's father. He and my sister had divorced years ago, and he had fought a losing battle against my sister's manipulation regarding custody. We had always maintained a cordial, distant relationship. He called me to ask if I had actually agreed to pay for the Sweet 16, because my sister was hounding him for money, claiming I had backed out at the last minute and ruined their daughter's life. I clarified the timeline for him, explaining that I had never agreed to pay a single cent, and recounted the ultimatum my mother had given me. He let out a long, heavy sigh and revealed the actual truth. He explained that my niece didn't even want a massive party. She had asked for a small dinner at a nice restaurant with 5 of her closest friends and a weekend trip to a nearby amusement park. The stretch limousine, the designer dress, and the private DJ were entirely my sister's invention. My ex-brother-in-law had done some digging through his own lawyers because my sister was suddenly claiming extreme financial hardship to try and increase his child support payments. He discovered that my sister was drowning in secret, high-interest credit card debt. She had fallen for a predatory multi-level marketing scheme a year prior, buying thousands of dollars of unsellable inventory, and had been floating her lifestyle on plastic ever since. The collection agencies were preparing to garnish her wages. The $10,000 was never meant for my niece. The plan was to guilt me into transferring the cash directly to my sister's account under the guise of funding the party. She intended to throw a cheap backyard barbecue for my niece, blame the downgraded party on unexpected vendor cancellations, and use the remaining $8,000 or $9,000 to pay off her most aggressive creditors to avoid wage garnishment. When I refused the initial demand, their entire house of cards collapsed. My mother's ultimatum wasn't just toxic pride, it was blind panic. They had banked everything on my reliable compliance. Hearing this confirmed every decision I had made. The betrayal cut deep, not because they needed money, but because they were willing to use my niece's milestone as an emotional weapon to defraud me. I thanked my ex-brother-in-law for the information and assured him I would not be stepping back into the chaos, mentioning that he was preparing to file for emergency primary custody based on the unsafe financial environment and the emotional manipulation my sister was putting their daughter through. I wished him luck and told him I would testify on his behalf if his lawyers ever needed a witness to my sister's financial instability. Update 3. The weekend of the supposed Sweet 16 arrived. I had spent the morning hiking, completely disconnected from the family drama, enjoying the crisp air and the profound peace of my new life. When I returned home and checked my social media, the disaster was playing out in real time across various family members' feeds. There was no limousine, there was no designer dress, there was no high-end DJ. My sister had attempted to throw a hastily organized party in a local public park. Judging by the blurry, chaotic photos posted by distant cousins, it was a miserable affair. It had rained earlier in the day, making the ground muddy. The food consisted of cheap pizzas sitting on damp picnic tables. The most striking image, however, was a candid photo someone had posted of my niece. She was sitting away from the group, wearing a simple sundress, looking absolutely devastated. The caption from a clueless relative read that it was a shame the rich uncle had ruined the big day. But family makes do. I felt a sharp pang of sympathy for my niece. She was collateral damage in her mother's war of entitlement. But I also knew that reaching out to her directly while she was under her mother's roof would only give my sister ammunition to drag me back into the fight. I had to remain a ghost. Later that evening, the doorbell rang. I checked the security cameras. It was my mother and my sister. They were standing on my porch, looking entirely unhinged. My sister was crying dramatically, clutching a tissue, while my mother hammered her fist against the door, demanding I open up and face the family I had destroyed. I did not go to the door. I did not engage. I simply picked up my phone, accessed the camera's two-way audio feature, and delivered a clear, emotionless warning. I stated that they were trespassing on my property, that they had 3 minutes to return to their vehicle and leave, and that if they did not comply, I would dispatch the local police to remove them. My mother screamed toward the camera, calling me a monster, and demanding I come out and look at the pain I had caused my sister. My sister wailed louder, leaning against the porch railing, as if her legs could no longer support her. I did not respond. I watched the timer on my phone. When 3 minutes passed and they were still screaming at my door, I dialed the non-emergency police line. I reported 2 unwanted individuals creating a disturbance on my property and requested an officer to escort them away. 10 minutes later, a cruiser pulled into my driveway. This sheer panic on my mother and sister's faces was captured perfectly on the security feed. Gesturing wildly to the officers, pointing at my house, and likely spinning a tragic tale of a cruel son and brother. The officers, however, were entirely uninterested in family lore. I watched through the window as they calmly checked their IDs, pointed toward the street, and waited until my mother and sister got into their car and drove away. That night, I received a notification that my mother had attempted to blast me on a community Facebook page, claiming I had called the police on my own grieving family. I didn't even have to defend myself. Before I could even consider drafting a response, my ex-brother-in-law had commented on her post. He systematically dismantled her narrative, explaining exactly why I had cut them off, mentioning the cancelled cell phones and the hidden credit card debt, and ending his comment by stating that he was taking my sister to court for custody. My mother deleted the entire post within 5 minutes. Update 4. It has been 8 months since the ultimatum that changed my life. The fallout was absolute and permanent. My ex-brother-in-law won his custody modification. The judge took one look at my sister's crushing debt, the impending wage garnishments, and the chaotic living situation, and awarded primary physical custody to the father. My niece moved out of my sister's apartment and into a stable, quiet home across town. Without my financial backing, and with her child support payments drastically reduced due to the custody change, my sister's financial reality finally caught up with her. She was evicted from her apartment shortly after the custody ruling. She moved back in with my mother, squeezing into a small 2-bedroom condo that my mother could barely afford on her fixed income. I hear through the family grapevine that they are miserable. They constantly fight, blaming each other for their current predicament, completely unable to accept that their own greed and entitlement caused their downfall. They are trapped in a toxic echo chamber of their own making, entirely cut off from the ATM they had relied on for over a decade. As for me, I have never been better. The money I used to bleed into their black hole of debt has been redirected into investments and travel. I bought a small cabin near a lake, a place they do not know exists and could never find. Last month, on my niece's 17th birthday, I received a handwritten letter in the mail. It was from her. She thanked me for everything I had tried to do over the years and apologized for her mother's behavior. She wrote that living with her dad had opened her eyes to how unhealthy things had been, and she finally understood why I had to walk away. She didn't ask for anything. She just wanted me to know she was okay and that she hoped I was happy. I set up a college fund in her name that same afternoon. I structured it in an ironclad trust, ensuring that neither my sister nor my mother could ever access a single penny of it. It will mature on her 18th birthday, completely under her control. I am still dead to my mother and my sister, but being a ghost has turned out to be the most peaceful existence I could have ever asked for.